Hi, you're on the This Is Crime channel. I'm Matilda. Listen to my new story. If you fall out of love with me, I'll take you to the slaughterhouse, she said as she embraced her husband. Catherine Knight was neither beautiful nor intelligent. However, she had one secret weapon that she used to attract and keep men. She was incredibly skillful when it came to intimacy. But even with that, she wasn't always able to compensate for her many oddities. For example, one minute she was calm, and the next she could make a scandal over some trifle. After such scenes, men usually ran away, fearing what the woman might do next time. Alas, one of them realized the danger too late. The twins. Catherine Mary Knight and her twin sister were born October 24, 1955, in the small Australian town of Tenterfield, becoming the fifth and sixth child in the family of Barbara and Jack Rogan. Until then, the family lived quite happily, but when the twins were 2 months old, their mother fell madly in love with her husband's colleague Keith Knight, and between them spun romance. When the truth came out, the lovers decided to run away from Tenterfield, settling in the city of Aberdeen. They soon married, and Keith even adopted twins. The other children stayed with their birth father, but his good deeds ended there. Keith abused alcohol and treated his wife and children terribly, but Barbara loved the man so much that she turned a blind eye to all his antics. In 1959, Jack Rogan died suddenly, after which Barbara took her 2 favorite sons to herself and left the other children to be raised by her late husband's sister. Brothers. The boys, looking up to their stepfather, in time began to adopt his habits, especially in his attitude toward the weaker sex. One day, when Katie was 6 years old, the brothers took her to the barn and did very bad things to her. Then it happened again and again. Of course, Katie told her mother, but she didn't believe her, calling her a liar and a crybaby. These words were deeply embedded in the little girl's memory. She realized that she must cope with her own problems, because no one will come to her aid. Sister Catherine, by the way, brothers for some reason did not offend, so even she did not believe the girl's stories. Because of this, they became distant, and by adolescence almost did not communicate with each other. Bully. At school, Catherine earned a reputation as a bully. She bullied her classmates, got into fights, and often took it out on teachers. Several times the girl brought a knife, scaring other children with it. For the most part, Catherine kept to herself. What is interesting, some days she could be polite and get good grades, but then everything invariably returned to normal. The girl became completely unpredictable, even dangerous. In 1969, when Catherine was 14 years old, died her uncle, Oscar Knight, who owned a farm breeding horses. The girl often went to visit him because he was probably the only person who treated her with understanding. Oscar's death hit hard on the teenager's psyche, which even without it could not be called stable. She later admits that after Oscar's funeral, his ghost came to her several times. He asked me about business and consoled me if I was bad. Dream job. At the age of 15, Catherine, not having learned how to write or read, dropped out of school and got a job at a local slaughterhouse. In her own words, it was the job she had always dreamed of. Catherine loved carcass cutting and especially working with steamed meat. Taking it in her hands and smelling it, she felt an incomparable pleasure. Because of this, girl often took extra shifts, spending at the meat factory much more time than other workers. Catherine quickly became a professional in her work. She learned to filigree cutting meat, then noticeably stood out among her colleagues. As a token of appreciation, management gave her a set of knives for her 16th birthday. She was very proud of the gift and hung it in her bedroom above her bed. In her bedroom above her bed. "What's the big deal?" she said when asked about her choice of a place to store the knives. "I should always have them handy in case I need them." David. In 1973, Catherine met David Kellett at the abattoir. The man got a job there as a guard after he was fired from the railroad because of his addiction to alcohol. It is worth saying that David's problem started when he witnessed an accident that happened to his friend and then got into an accident with a bus that was transporting children. Although the man was innocent, what happened affected him greatly. 18-year-old Catherine immediately took notice of David and took him under her wing. She, by that time, had already had experience in relationships with men and managed to become famous for her fiery temper. However, Kellett was so moved by her support and joint trips to the countryside that he did not pay attention to the alarm bells, sometimes turning into alarm bells. For example, once a woman got angry with him over a bad dinner and put a pot of freshly cooked stew over his head. On another occasion, she pushed him off her motorcycle and David dislocated his arm. On the other hand, if David got into a fight while out partying, which was quite often, Catherine always came to his rescue. As they say, she had a well-placed punch, and her heavy hand was feared by all who were unlucky enough to meet night in a bad mood. She was the kind of woman you'd expect to find. She could beat the crap out of anyone, one Aberdeen resident later said of Catherine Knight. David and Catherine married in 1974, and already on the first wedding night, the young wife made a scandal because her husband performed his marital duty only 3 times instead of 5, as she considered normal. Frying pan. Soon Catherine became pregnant. However, this happy event did not make her calmer. On the contrary, she became even more nervous. One evening, David went to the pub, but sat up with friends and returned 20 minutes later than the curfew set by his wife. While David tried to reassure his wife, promising that this would not happen again, she went to the kitchen and returned with a large steel frying pan. The man had no argument against such a strong argument, and he rushed to escape, but Catherine managed to put him with the frying pan several times. After reaching the neighbors, David managed to knock on the door and immediately lost consciousness. He was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Although the man spent about a month in the hospital, he eventually declined to press charges against his wife. Depression. In May 1976, the couple had a daughter, Melissa. By that time, the couple's relationship had finally broken down. David was still afraid of Catherine, but not so much that he did not cheat on her. As a result, when their child was only 3 months old, he ran away with a new girlfriend in Queensland. The day after her husband's elopement, Catherine went out for a walk with Melissa. Passers-by noticed that the woman was behaving very strangely, strongly rocking the stroller and shouting swear words. Worried about the child, they called the police. Arriving officers decided to hospitalize Catherine in a psychiatric hospital. A short time later, doctors diagnosed her with postpartum depression. After a few weeks of treatment, Catherine was discharged from the hospital. However, the therapy did not help her too much, because after a couple of days, the woman took her daughter to the railroad crossing and went home. Fortunately, the baby was spotted by a worker who happened to be at the crossing quite by accident. Catherine, meanwhile, took an axe at home and went to a bar with it. It was there that she was arrested by the police when she tried to get some man to go with her. Knight was once again placed in a mental hospital. Come back. After getting out of the asylum a couple weeks later, Catherine decided to track down her husband in Queensland and bring him back at any cost. Since she didn't have a car, she hitched a ride and pulled out a knife and asked the driver to take her to the address. When the car stopped near the car service center where David worked, Catherine jumped out of the car and headed toward her husband, who was so stunned that he didn't even try to escape. "Come back to me and my daughter. I miss you so much," Catherine said, and suddenly burst into tears. Happy reunion was interrupted by the police, who arrived after a call from the owner of the car in which Catherine reached Queensland. Officers overpowered Knight and took her back to a psychiatric hospital. Most incredibly, after this scene, David seemed to feel guilty for cheating, and decided to return to his wife. A month later, when Catherine was released from the hospital, he met her with his daughter, Melissa. She was staying with her aunt, Knight's sister, during periods of her mother's absence. The move. In 1976, David and Catherine moved to Ipswich, where the woman again took a job in a slaughterhouse. For the next 4 years, they lived relatively peacefully. On March 6, 1980, the couple had another daughter, Natasha. However, over the years, relations between the spouses became increasingly strained. The main reason for this was Catherine's outbursts of anger, which she could not control. "The last straw for David were the words of Catherine," said the woman when they lay embraced. "If you fall out of love with me, I'll take you to the slaughterhouse." Given Catherine's past, David suspected this was no joke, so shortly after the conversation, he filed for divorce and moved out on his spouse. To his relief, she took the divorce calmly and did not put her words into action, at least this time, in search of the one and only. Divorced from her husband, Catherine returned to Aberdeen, rented a house there, and settled into her old job. Alas, just a few months later, she injured her back in a meatpacking plant, leaving her disabled. The union succeeded in getting her employer to buy Catherine a flat in Aberdeen, and she also received a disability pension. In fact, after 6 months, the woman was almost recovered, but no one would remove her disability, so now Knight could not work. A period free time 30-year-old Catherine began to spend on dating men. However, for a long time she did not meet with anyone, changing suitors almost every day. This lasted until the fall of 1986, when the woman met David Saunders. It seems that between them sparked, because after only 2 weeks of acquaintance, David has already moved into the house of his beloved. For some time their relationship was going fine, but the man was very popular among the local residents, because of which Catherine was very jealous of him. Quarrels provoked by a woman led not only to verbal altercations, but also to manhandling. Saunders constantly threatened to leave, and once fulfilled the promise. In retaliation, Catherine did to his dog what she learned in her favorite job. "I'll do the same to you if I find out you're cheating on me," she told Saunders. Strangely, it worked, and he went back to Catherine. In gratitude, she gave birth to his daughter Sarah in June 1988. For a couple of months, everything went as well as possible, but one day the couple quarreled and the woman grabbed a knife. Saunders ended up in the hospital. Having recovered, he tried to visit his daughter, but Catherine did not let him on the doorstep and even called the police, accusing the man of harassment. He had no choice but to leave, as the woman went to court and got a restraining order. Over the next few years, Catherine dated a former work colleague, John Chillingworth. In 1991, the woman gave birth to her 4th child by him, a son whom they named Eric. 3 years later, their relationship broke up because Catherine fell in love with another. John Price. John Charles Thomas Price is a local funny man and balladeer. Like Catherine, born in 1955. He had 3 children from a previous marriage. His 2-year-old daughter lived with her mother, and his 2 teenage children lived with him. The man had just divorced his wife and did not intend to build a serious relationship, which was directly stated to Catherine when she sat down to him in a bar and offered to get acquainted. Catherine did not pay attention to these words. She was accustomed to achieve their own at any cost, and was confident that she could change the mind of any man. In addition, John not only liked her, he also worked at the mine and received a decent salary. A woman raising 4 children alone was not enough disability pension, so she saw him as a source of income. Eventually, Catherine got her way. In 1995, John invited her to move in with him. Of course, Price was aware of the woman's reputation. However, her charms were so strong that he could not resist. Family. The beginning of their life was idyllic. John and Catherine's children got along well with each other, resulting in a large and strong family, which went on vacations to the sea. went camping, and visited amusement parks. It seemed that Catherine had finally found happiness. However, it was not so. The woman wanted at all costs to marry John, which she regularly reminded him. In the summer of 1998, John, in response to another question Catherine about the wedding, said that he did not intend to make her a proposal because they are already happy. The angry woman considered this a personal insult and decided to take revenge. She called John's employer and claimed he was stealing. In the course of the inspection, it turned out that the man had indeed stolen an old decommissioned first aid kit from work, although he was supposed to destroy it. Alas, he was fired anyway. That same day, he told Catherine to get out of his house and never come near him again. Red flag. Contrary to what he said, a few months later, John resumed his relationship with Catherine, although they did not move in together, from which they often quarreled. During these altercations, Knight finally showed Price her true nature, and he, convinced of the truth of the rumors, began to fear her. In February 2000, during another quarrel, Catherine grabbed a knife. Having witnessed the injuries, John, the first of all suitors Knight, went to the police, receiving a week later a restraining order against approaching the woman. This document became like a red flag for Catherine to a bull. On February 29th, John showed up at work in an extremely depressed state and announced to his colleagues that if he didn't come to the factory the next day, it meant that Catherine had gotten to him. His frightened friends advised him to move to another location as soon as possible. However, the man feared that Catherine might harm his children or his ex-wife. John got home around 11 p.m. that day. He took a shower and went to bed. A short time later, Catherine arrived at his house, carrying a black bag. In it, as it would later turn out, was her favorite set of knives. It is not known what Catherine said to John when he came to the door, but after a minute the man let her in as if nothing had happened, and they went to the bedroom. In the morning. The next day, John didn't show up for work, which wasn't like him. Remembering the man's ominous warning, worried co-workers immediately contacted the police. The officers, without waiting for a response to the persistent knock on the door, went inside and discovered a horrific scene in the bedroom. Judging by what they saw, Catherine has not lost any of the skills acquired at her job. Interestingly, Catherine was lying there. She was unconscious, and in her hand she was holding an empty medication packet. All indications were that she wanted to end her life. Looking ahead, it was not so. The woman had only taken a few sleeping pills. I cannot fail to mention that before falling asleep, Catherine cooked a rich soup with potatoes, pumpkin, zucchini, and I think you know what else. She placed the meal on plates, clearly intending to treat John's children, but she didn't touch the food herself. What happened? Catherine Knight was first admitted to the emergency room, but when it was discovered that she was only a heavy sleeper, she was immediately transferred to a psychiatric hospital. When she regained consciousness, she stated that she had no idea what happened on February 29th because she doesn't remember anything. What happened? Where's John? I don't remember anything, she repeated. Of course, no one believed her. On March 2nd, 2001, Catherine was formally charged with murder. She flatly refused to plead guilty, insisting on memory loss and mental problems. Catherine's strategy did not work, however. Psychiatric experts, although they found that she had a borderline personality disorder, but did not find any memory problems or serious mental problems. At the time of the crime, she was of sound mind, therefore, she can be held responsible for her atrocities, the psychiatrist's report said. Sentencing. On January 8, 2002, Judge Barry O'Keefe pronounced the following sentence, abridged version. The prisoner, Catherine Knight, deserves no mercy. She has behaved cruelly and viciously towards Mr. Price. She has shown him no mercy. She has expressed no remorse or regret. If released, she poses a serious threat to society. Her history with her former partners is testament to that. I'm convinced her crime was premeditated. What she did was no doubt motivated by her resentment of Mr. Price for rejecting her as a woman. His last moments must have been a time of extreme horror for him and a time of utter delight for her. The only appropriate punishment for a prisoner is life imprisonment. Parole is out of the question. Catherine Knight thus became the first woman to be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in Australia. Knight appealed in 2006, saying it was too harsh a sentence for an elderly woman seeking peace. The 3 judges hearing the appeal unanimously rejected it. So the 68-year-old woman continues to serve her sentence in prison and will apparently remain there for the rest of her life. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and put a thumbs up. Look forward to more stories from the team of our channel. This is Criminal.